Welcome, folks. Once again, I'm your host, devahntaucolonel, and joining you here with the Inspired Challenge Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. And on today's episode, I bring you a man of many talents, which I was unaware of until I saw it with my eyes, I heard it with my ears, and I was forced to say to myself, dang, this man's kind of fire. A man of culture that understands the impact and the sweetness of anime. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to bring to you Mr. JD.
How's it going?
Going great, JD.
Pleasure to be here, man.
Dude, so glad to have you here. Thank you for taking the time out to come in this thing.
Absolutely.
We've been trying to set this up for months and months now.
Yeah.
So it's awesome.
Yeah.
To be able to get this thing rolling.
Yeah. Dude, I am in great company. I went back and watched some other videos, man. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Been totally blessed with some of the people that have been willing to come on, and blessed to have you as well. So
thank you, sir.
I'm excited to dig into some of what's in, I know, that brilliant mind and see what we can get in with the audience here.
Excellent.
So to set things up, I want to treat this first piece right here as kind of you just introducing yourself to the audience.
Sure.
And maybe telling them about yourself, what you do. And then if you have a faith walk, then bringing that to the company of people.
Yep.
And then just like how you've navigated life with all of this in mind.
Sure. I'd love to unpack that. So my name is JD Egger. I am currently the Director of Operations at Journey Christian Church, which is where Devante and I first met. Mm-hmm. So Director of Operations, basically, if it's not something that happens on stage, I have some sort of control over or some sort of influence in. HR, facilities, IT, security, so finance. So all the stuff that most people don't see on a Sunday kind of goes through me in one way, shape, or form. So it's a pretty big role. One that I never thought I would ever get into. Most of my career was in IT for like 20 years. And I'll share a little bit of the story about how I got to Journey, but most of my career was in IT, and then somehow I landed in operations. Like the keys to the building, here you go. So, and I say that with a smile on my face, and not to take myself too seriously, but I really feel God does not call the qualified; He qualifies the called. And I felt called to that role more than I ever felt that I'm qualified for this role. Man, there are days I don't feel qualified at all, but we make it through there. Okay, so I was born in New York. My parents moved from New York, Northeast New Jersey area, and the Central Florida area for the first 7-8 years of my life. We settled in Altamont Springs in '87 in the house I grew up in. So my dad is a German immigrant. Mm-hmm. My mom is a first-generation Moroccan. My dad is Christian. My mom is Jewish. It was a very interesting household growing up. In that though, we primarily went to church. My dad was the spiritual leader of the household, but we always kind of celebrated the Jewish high holies. So that was always a part of it. But it was for me, it was very insulated. Mm-hmm. I grew up going to Sunday school at Baptist churches. That was my upbringing. Mm-hmm. When I turned about 12 or 13. My mom said, "Hey, you need to get bar mitzvahed," and I really
bar mitzvah.
I know, dude. Like I didn't know anything. I didn't know anything about true Jewish temple culture. So,
looking at bar mitzvahs, I always thought that they happen when you're like 16, like a coming of age type of thing, which I know it is, but I never would have imagined that it was at the age of 12.
Yeah. So, well, it's a funny story because I never actually did my bar mitzvah. So my mom wanted me to, but so I grew up in church. So when I went to temple for the first time at like 11 or 12, dude, it was complete culture shock for me. And it's not that I don't embrace change, but when it happens sometimes very rapidly for me, I don't know what to do. and maybe it's an insecurity in me. I pulled away from it. So I said, no, you know what? I'm used to going to church. That's what I like. I'm not going to do it. So I didn't do it. Which I guess one way or another, it's fine. It didn't necessarily. We celebrated the Jewish high holies, and we celebrated it in our homes. So what I knew of Jewish culture was this very insulated, menorah type Moroccan food Jewish culture that happened inside the house. My spiritual culture really was church. So that's kind of where I gravitated to. So in all of that, obviously I didn't get bar mitzvahed. I went to church with my family up until probably around the same time, about 12 or 13. We had left a church we were going to in Orlando. It was a Baptist church, and let's just be real for a minute. In the middle of Central Florida, when they found out my mom was Jewish, and it was a bunch of good old boys from the South, they didn't like it. So the church that I had called home didn't make me feel welcome anymore. So we left there. We bounced around from a couple other churches, and then by the time I hit high school, just the rebellious part of me didn't want to go to church anymore. Part of that was also like my dad and I started not getting along. So if I wasn't, I guess I don't know how to really articulate it other than that I saw how he was as a Christian when I was coming of age and understanding how people were. I didn't necessarily want to be like that. So I pulled away from church at that point. And then I guess I just thought I was going to be a rock musician and play the drums in some heavy metal band, which never worked out at all. So yeah, I graduated high school and then kind of started my professional career in many ways. So after high school, I didn't go immediately into college. My wife and I, we were dating in high school, but we had broken up after high school because I'm trying to live this rock star lifestyle, which just was not conducive to a healthy relationship. I ended up getting back into college. I got a degree in web design. When I got my first job out of college, I didn't really do any web design. I did a little bit, but every company that had hired me, especially in the early going, they're like, oh, well, you work on computers. Can you fix our server? Can you fix our phone server? Can you fix our fax machine? I'm like, I don't know anything about this, but the good part of that was I found for me the consistency in life was easier to earn a living doing a practical job instead of a creative job. Like designing websites and making logos, it's all subjective.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if a guy doesn't like the logo I made for him or the website design I made for him, then I don't earn money. And it's much more practical to fix a printer. If a printer's not working, there's like 5 reasons why it's not working. IT guys hate printers, but so I don't know. I've always been kind of artistic. I loved to draw when I was younger, but as I got older, I just needed to be practical on how I earned a living for my wife and for my family. So I kind of just went the self-taught IT route. And I'd worked several jobs in different organizations. I bounced between the RV industry. I was the IT guy for a multi-site, very large RV dealer in Central Florida. I left there to do pharmaceuticals, which was huge. So in all of that, I'm not going to church anymore. I'm a pretty responsible guy, but my bearing was off. When I left the RV dealer, I could have stayed there forever. I could have been their IT guy for 40 years, but I always knew what my ceiling was going to be with them. I was always just going to be their IT guy, and I wasn't okay with that. So I left there, and I pursued money, and I pursued it hard, and I got it. So I left the RV industry. I went to pharmaceuticals with some people that I'd worked with before, and we ended up turning a smaller office support team into a national support team, which we started a company off of, which, man, for like 18 months, I'd never made more money in my entire life. Seriously, what I would have made in 5 years at the RV dealer, I made in 18 months. So it was really life changing. But as soon as it came up, it went down. Just how the government dealt with the type of pharmaceuticals, it was compounding pharmacy. There's a long story behind it, but the contracts just dried up. They dried up in like 4 to 6 months, and we just couldn't recover. So ultimately, I was left completely depressed, completely empty. I'm sitting on this pile of cash, and I'm more sad than I've ever been in my entire life. Because this is what I wanted. I wanted to be a business owner. I wanted to be this. But that's not ever what God designed me for. And it took me so long to realize that. So after that crashed, I went and I was working for a local managed services provider, which is basically small and medium business who don't have the funds to hire a full-time IT guy because they can be expensive, or IT teams. They would outsource their IT staff to a managed services provider, and they just run their entire operation, which was awesome. I loved it. I got to deal with different industries, different clients, which the older I get, the more I think I like instead of the work. And it's not to say that I don't like the work. Please don't hear that. But I like the people and the processes around what drives all that. So the work was great, but the workplace was toxic. I liked the guys I worked with, but their work ethic wasn't my work ethic. I wanted to work for the customer, and they didn't really want to, and that caused conflict. And I work for a church, and I try to be good, but sometimes I can't always de-escalate. And when you're in a situation where you have multiple people who both don't de-escalate, it becomes arguments in the office. And I just got to the point where I'm like, I just can't do this anymore. So I started applying everywhere. I mean, it got to the point, Devontae, where I wasn't even seeing any new jobs on Indeed and ZipRecruiter. I wasn't seeing anything anymore. So I did something that I hadn't done in like 20 years. I got on my knees and I begged the Lord. I said, whatever you want me to do, I will do it. Tearful. Like I even get choked up talking about it, because I knew at that point I couldn't do it on my own. And what happened was my wife and I had just started going back to Journey. Well, she started going back to Journey, and this is hilarious, because she had been saying, hey, you need to come to Journey. It's a great place. And I've got all this baggage from past experience with church and church people. And I remember telling her, I said, I'll never set foot in a church again. And here I am, the director of operations for a church. So anyway, so I'm applying everywhere, and I'm not finding anything. My wife texts me calls me one day and says, hey, I'm praying for you. And I'm like, okay, great. I've never really seen prayer work in my life, but thank you. And 2 hours later, she sent me a text where Journey was looking for an IT director. And it was one of those things, if I could get up and walk around the room and show you, it's like, like when a parent tells their kid to go clean their room and their shoulders slump, and they're like, can I do anything else? I'm sitting here, I'm saying to God, I know I said I would do whatever you wanted me to do, but can I just not do that? Can I not go work for a church? And now he said, you're coming. So I ended up getting hired on at Journey. And it was so funny, man, because right as we were starting to go to Journey and before that job offer kind of came through, I was going to a 5 a.m. men's Bible study. We called it Man Zone back in the day. And the theme for that was a man in his work. So here I am struggling with work and what am I going to do for a living? And God's preparing me to come work in his kingdom. It just was crazy. So yeah, that was in April of 2018. I got hired to be on staff at Journey. Totally green in my faith. I at some point I was sitting there looking around a room and I'm seeing all these people that really deeply love the Lord, and I'm like, am I in the right place? But no, I wasn't. So I got hired as the IT director. We had some shifting of some staffing. It left a void in the operations area, which Pastor Roddy was the executive pastor at the time, but he was retiring. And he and I started having so many conversations. At one point, he just came into my office. He's like, so what do you do for Journey? Where are you involved? And the guy that actually hired me, the previous executive pastor, he had kind of put me like, hey, when the facilities guy is gone, I want you to back him up. I want you to know what he does, because if he just backups for backups. So slowly but surely, God was preparing me for all these different things, even in like the reporting and the metrics that we do for Journey. So little by little, God was prepping me. Roddy kind of soft retired the year right before Pastor John was leaving. So they just threw me in an operational role. I say threw me, but they took some time to prepare me, some certification courses and stuff like that. And then I assumed the role at the beginning of 2022. What year is this? 23? Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I've been in that role at Journey now for a little over a year and a half. And it's a lot to do. But I'm a problem solver. And I enjoy working with people, and I enjoy the processes that run things. It was kind of what I was talking about before. It's not that I don't like the work of IT. I'm much more interested in what drives IT and making sure that people enjoy and that we're putting the right people in the right places. So now I'm blessed to have a staff of 6 people that all have different individual skill sets that run the HR, that run finance, and I'm kind of overseeing to make sure all of that is working. So yeah, that's kind of my testimony in a nutshell, my friend.
Yeah, man. So that was so good. And for those listening, you might have heard like I was very quiet on that. I'm trying to do a thing where like I allow the guests to speak their whole thing.
Yep.
So then we can use that as like its own individual thing. It's new. Normally I am interjecting a lot and whatnot. So
I can talk. You stop me when you want.
No, yeah. So now like hearing that, now I definitely want to like go into some of those things there.
Sure.
So, and I'll take it all the way back to even the bar mitzvah, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, let's go.
So when is the correct way to say that? Is it bar mitzvah or bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah?
So bat mitzvah would be for females, but bar mitzvah would be for boys. So
Okay.
they gender separate it.
Got you. Yeah, because have you seen, there's a movie that came out recently called You Are So Not Invited to My Bat Mitzvah.
No, I have not.
So it's a movie that features Adam Sandler, his wife, and their kids.
Okay, yeah. I think I read an article about that where people were giving him grief for wanting his family in the movie or whatever. But yeah, so loosely I know about it.
Yeah, and it's a good movie for like a solid 94% of it, and then there's 6% of it that I saw them just outraged.
Yeah.
But it was a good movie. But the way that the movie depicts like the way that the Jewish schools are and like the culture that surrounds it, and just like it's so interesting to hear that in like a Jewish school a student will walk into class and then you just hear Shabbat Shalom from the teacher.
Yep.
And I think that's kind of a cool thing right there, just to have like and I know that's probably the equivalent of going to like a Christian private school where there's prayer in class and things like that, but like to see it and to see the Jewish culture represented like that, like there was a piece of like appreciation that's like, man, that's so cool. And I wanted to ask you, like, I know you said you never did it and everything like that, and would you say that like a big piece of it was because you felt like you were like a visitor to the custom of it, and so it just wasn't something that you like?
Yeah, so that's one component of it. I definitely felt like an outsider, really. It's not to say that any of the kids ever treated me meanly or that the rabbis were rude to me, but I don't know how to articulate it other than I just didn't feel like I belonged there in that moment. The other part was my mom was forcing me to do it, and like I don't know, just the knucklehead in me is like, okay, well if you're telling me to do something now, I'm not going to do that. So. But
so relatable.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense there. And then the next part that I wanted to ask you about was related to what you had said. One quick second. We're going to pause for a quality assessment. So we were moving into the next section that I wanted to ask you about was that portion where you mentioned that you started to be in the rebellious spirit a bit, and you had seen things from your dad that you were like, that's not something that I want to be a dominant part of my life. And I think that's so relatable to a lot of guys, like, because in so many ways, fathers have like between Family Guy and American Dad and The Simpsons and even all kinds of new shows, like the dad figure typically is made to look like somewhat of an idiot. So like a dislike for fathers is kind of prominent in media. And then the culture of like, oh, you're gonna be a bum dad that lives like her. So like there's like we're kind of all primed to it. So I was curious, and you can share what you're comfortable with. Where did that sense of like what was it that you saw in him at that time, which I know was a long time ago, probably now things are very different. But at the time, what was it that you saw that made you say, I don't really want any part of what you're doing because of X, Y, Z?
So it really boils down to, it's almost in some instances like he just had two different personalities. So there was an upright, upstanding businessman church dad that always wanted to do the right thing, and nobody's perfect. Always wanted to do the right thing and always tried to instruct his kids to do the right thing. But the flip side of that was, as I got older, I just saw him as a human being. I saw him at times that was angry and didn't steward his money very well, and just you get to a point where it's like part of it was me being rebellious. I'm not going to say all this was on my dad, so please don't hear that. But it just was like, okay, well, if you say Jesus is all these things and we should be like Jesus, why are you not like that when you're around us? And I just didn't like it. I didn't like the instruction. I didn't like the discipline side of it. It's like, okay, it's so funny because I'm a metalhead, and I always had wanted forever, because my dad he grew up listening to Led Zeppelin and all that rock. I thought, okay, growing up, here I am, I like Metallica, Pantera, some of the other bands, and like we could never share that for whatever reason. I don't know. It's like, hey, dude, you grew up listening to this. Why can't we both listen together? It wasn't until years later where he's like, hey, you ever heard this song by Metallica? I'm like, dude, come on.
Oh, wow.
Like, you ever heard that song Battery? I'm like, dude, I've been listening to that. I remember listening to that song in the early 90s, playing Sonic the Hedgehog on my Genesis with Metallica blaring. But anyway, so like we didn't have this opportunity to share that. Well, your music is satanic, and like, I'm like, okay, I'm just done with this. Like, you tell me to be this, you're not this, I'm just not going to do it. So it just, and I just was a rebellious teenager. I didn't want to put my focus where it needed to be. And I wanted to hang out with my friends all the time. And we just argued about it. And I just got to the point where I just was not going to do what he wanted me to do, which is tough because now I got two boys. And one of them's a giant, so what do I do with that? So that's really where that came from.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense there. Do you think that if you had seen the consistency in public persona and private persona, that may have changed your response to like what you felt about and your acceptance of your faith at that time?
It probably would have helped, yeah. It probably would have been helped. And my dad was an old school dad where, it's like, it's so funny. You talk about, TV shows and they portray dads as dolts and idiots a lot of times, which kind of offends me a little bit because we're not that way. But if I would have seen a little bit more consistency, it probably would have. And maybe if he wasn't upset all the time, maybe it would have changed some things. But I don't know. I was a rebellious idiot in my teenage years. I just was, dude. Like, there's no other way to word that.
So maybe like as much as he wanted to be in the Spirit, he couldn't always be in the Spirit.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Oh man. And so now as now the shoe is on your foot, like what do you think that you're doing as again a Christian-led father of sons now, coming into those ages? Like, where do you see the parallels with your fatherhood, and where do you see the differences of your fatherhood compared to your father as you understood it?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest difference is that I try to be more available for what my boys are doing. One thing was, it's huge for me. It might not be huge for a lot of other people, but I by the time I had gotten to high school, I had gotten out of wanting to really play any sports. But my oldest son, he's a big boy. He's huge. He's like 6'3", 240, but he is a big dude. And so he plays football. And when he was growing up, he was playing Pop Warner. And I got tired of sitting on the sideline, but I'd never played football. And I just thought to myself one day, and one of the coaches had said, we'd had so many conversations about football, and I'd watched it and played it really my whole life. And he's like, hey, I need more coaches. Will you help out? I'm like, absolutely. Because I didn't need a degree in football or to have played football to be involved in my son's life. And I wanted to be involved in other kids' lives, because there are so many kids that they show up there and they're coming from a broken home, and part of their rebellious spirit is because they don't have anybody to help shape and guide them. And not that I wanted to play a father figure for all these kids, but if I could do my part to help some kid, you never know the impact of the one word you say to a kid when he's 8 or 9 years old, because sometimes that stuff will stick with you for life.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to be more available. The availability of my time for my boys it just wasn't something. My dad had always been kind of preoccupied in whatever he wanted to do. It's so funny when we talk about, like, you had asked me earlier about what my prayer is. We can get to this later, but I'm still struggling with that interpersonal relationship with my dad, even to this day. So just being available and knowing when I get to the point where I feel anxiety or anger towards him, it's like, okay, hold on, time out. You remember how you felt on the other side of that. So march your butt back in there, Dad, and go apologize to your kid. Go wrap your arms around him.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you guys have that where it comes up a lot, where you will be the one that takes the first step to kind of mend the anger in there. Yeah, I definitely try to do that. And the funny thing is, my oldest son is really nothing like me. He's more like his mom. He's very kind of quiet in most circumstances, but my youngest son is just like me. He will fight on everything. You tell him to do something and he's going to do the exact opposite. So I've got two different relationships at home with my boys. Like, me and my oldest, we're like best buds. It's like we're just, our relationship has grown. Not that we'll never not be father and son, but now where it's kind of like, okay, well, we're kind of friends now. My youngest, it's like, it's harder. He's more stronger in his personality, in his conviction. When he wants something, he wants it, and he doesn't back down. And I don't back down. And then you have that, and you find yourself arguing with a 9-year-old, like, how did this kid get so flippin' smart? Like, what is going on here? So I've had to mend that fence probably more with my younger one than my older one. It was even the other day, I can't remember, we got into something. It's just a kid thing. Hey, go clean up your room. And it becomes, you're arguing with him for 20 minutes. It's like, just, if you would have just cleaned your room from the beginning, we wouldn't be doing this. So yeah, I find myself getting more upset than I should be. And then it's like, hey, let's sit down. You can't talk to your mom this way. Don't talk to me this way. We're still your parents. You're in our house. Like, we don't play that game, which is one thing I'm very glad my wife and I see eye to eye on the core things, especially about our boys. So yeah, it's one of those things. Let's sit down with him, put my arm around him, tell him I love him, instruct him in a more
kind way that I know I would have wanted when I was younger.
Man, that's awesome right there, to be able to have kind of that reference point where you can put yourself in there, kind of put the reset button, the pause button in there, and then like, okay, let me come back with like a better spirit to work it out with. Because like you said, like, so a lot of people are really still just trying to figure out what the heck am I doing with this thing. None of it comes with like a manual. There's a lot of like suggested things now, like these are best practices, but it's so much easier to read it and watch something on it than it is to like actually quell that, like, especially when you feel like it's like a righteous anger, to quell that and instead to say, okay, as justified as I would be to sit in this and to be in this in order to teach a pertinent lesson, I need to embody something that I know is more important to be able to pass that on and have that be the memory that they think of me with.
And you know, the other part that's funny about that is because sometimes I can get loud, and sometimes I'll yell, and my dad's voice comes out of my mouth, and it's like, wait a second, let's pause, and then let's rethink our strategy here.
Oh man. And then so now, like, as you were getting rebellious in some of your years, not wanting to be in your faith as much, do you see, how does that now, what's the kind of mirror side for you as a father and your son's faiths?
Sure. Well, we probably would not be at Journey if it wasn't for my oldest AJ. So he started going to FCA at middle school. And the thing that was shocking, it wasn't shocking for me. It was maybe I took it the wrong way, or I got a little hurt by it. He didn't come to me asking about faith. He went to my wife. And I'm like, wait a minute. He needs to be coming to me. I'm supposed to be the spiritual leader of my house. And I wasn't. So, and they've got a much different dynamic in their mother-son relationship.
Right.
It's, they're two peas in a pod when it comes to stuff like that. So really the parallel is I knew when I can look back on it now and say, man, I wish I just would have developed my faith a little bit stronger. And it isn't even, I mean, reading the Bible and praying and all those things are important, but also being in community and surrounding yourself with like-minded people who love the Lord help you in that.
Yeah.
So instead of, seeing that as an opportunity to say, well, AJ, if you don't really want to do this, you don't have to do that. But no, it's like, let's nurture this a little bit, and it really became a stopping point for me. It's like, okay, well, I see where my family is going and they're going to church and I can be rebellious and not go to church and lose my family. What do you want? Well, I wasn't about to lose everything I worked for. So I went with my family to church, and I remember just sitting in the worship center, arms folded, not believing a word of anything that's coming out of everybody's mouth. But knowing that that's the wrong posture to have, and knowing I want my son to see that this can be good, and keeping that routine about it. There's so much can be said for just saying, hey, stick to it. Go on Wednesdays. It's harder now, he's in football, but go on Wednesdays, go on Sundays, be consistent with it. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with friends that go, not friends that want to argue against religion all the time. Yeah. And like, I don't ever want to get into a position where I'm demanding or forceful with my kids unless I have to. I want to try to just, if they're off course, just gently turn them the right way. But I've been blessed, especially with AJ, that he has got friends. Most of his friends that he knows go to church.
Awesome. Yeah.
And they all go to Journey. So I feel great about all that.
That's super vital. Heck yeah. Being in like that community spirit. And when you were around, because how old is he? He's in the high school ministry, so at least 14, 15?
He is 17.
17 now.
Yeah, okay. He's a senior. I can't believe I even have one.
Seeing how he's in community now, would you say that were you more like either a loner or not as in community as he was at that age?
I've always kind of been a loner. I kind of feel a little more at peace in solitude, even though we're designed for community. I don't know. I kind of feel more at peace, which is something I'm working on. But I did have a community of friends growing up in high school. Some of them I still talk to. Others, they just, we parted ways. So I did have a community, but it wasn't a community of friends, as I look back now, that were really guided by the Holy Spirit at all. The Holy Spirit just wasn't even in our circle.
Yeah.
So
it was more just like shared interests within the world and things that you just had in common.
Yep.
And kind of gravitating towards people that were like-minded in that way.
Yep. We were all metalheads. Yeah. That's what we were.
Right. And then, and so the Holy Spirit was kind of like the afterthought in those friendships. Like it was there, but it was like second to...
I wouldn't even say the Holy Spirit was in any of it. We were trying to run from the Holy Spirit.
Oh, man.
Yeah, which was hard because in my heart, I'd always been a believer. Like, I remember there was one of my friends, he's helped me in so many different ways, but we would always fight and argue about the existence of God. And here I am, even being, an idiot and having a rebellious spirit, always being a believer. And I'm like, dude, God is real. Like, well, prove it to me. Well, I can't prove it to you. I don't know how I can prove this to you, but I've always felt the presence of the Holy Spirit in my life. But for a good long portion, I'm like, I'm running from it. So,
wow, it's interesting to see the way that the difference of fatherly approaches, motherly approaches, and when you got with your wife, like where in your whole story there does the relationship with your wife come into play, and her spirituality and how she like developed and all that?
Freshman year of high school is when we first met. Then we started dating our sophomore year. So we've been together since 1994. There were some breakups in there. And she comes from a Southern family. She grew up in church as well, too. We were both, when we met, neither one of us really kind of went to church, but we both were believers. Her family is believers, my family believers. But the routine of church and the routine of faith and opening your Bible and praying, that stuff just wasn't really there. Okay. And I remember one time, right about when I had proposed to her, her mom had said, well, you're Jewish and we're Christian. And I had to kind of frame that for her. She goes, how are you going to raise your kids? And I said, well, we're going to raise them in church if we raise them anywhere. Like, again, that goes back to like the Jewish culture shock. I know I'm Jewish by blood, but I'm a Christian by faith. Yeah. So, that was just kind of, we knew where we were going to go with that. It just took time for our faith to mature together.
Okay. And then as you guys were together, she started to lean into it more, and then you just, as the family was going, you were like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, like the grumpy old man. Yeah.
But I think it's really cool that you allowed yourself to fight against yourself, not just in thought, but also in action.
Yep.
Doing what you did not want to do. It's very Paul-esque when I think about it. I do not what I want to do, and I don't do what I want to do, kind of thing. So a great example, I think, of just literally going by faith, walking by faith, and just saying, because as families, our first job obviously is to be the priest, the minister of our homes, and so just allowing that to be fed and not quenching it in any way. Even if it wasn't necessarily perfect in every, you being the leader of it, at a certain point, you still got to that place by not being the, hyper-controlling, very, I am the leader, and
Yeah.
I didn't say we're going to do this, so
Yeah.
that's not going to be what we do.
Well, I would say this very respectfully. My wife would not put up with that. and I don't have a domineering spirit about me. I don't have a controlling spirit about me. And I would say this, when it's funny that you were just saying like how you decided to fight yourself. When I got on my knees and prayed and said, God, however, that was the easiest thing I could have ever done. The fight was saying no. The fight was not in saying yes. That was the easiest part of all of it. I'm not saying it's gotten easier since, because your faith journey and walking in faith with Christ is hard. It is hard in the world that we live in. Of the sinners, I am the worst. And fighting it was harder. Fighting to maintain what I wanted to do was harder than it ever was to say yes.
Wow. So, that's a great frame to look at it, is that like, because we do have so many reasons to want to fight it, between bad representatives of the faith, between personal hurt, between experiences and shared experience with people that aren't of it, that encourage you against it, to blatantly being attacked for your faith in a lot of places. Like, those things, you do have to battle to get out of that place where it's like, I have all these reasons not to, and my want is to, but all these things tell me no. And you have to fight against all those things to be able to say yes. And then when you, it makes me think of the hierarchy of needs when we are thinking of like the different things that are important to us. When we have enough money, when we have enough abundance, when we have enough love, friendships, all these things, a person is the most unlikely to go into their faith the better that they're doing in life without their faith. And then when a person is just at that point where they have to look at, I don't know how I'm going to meet the very basic.
Yeah.
Finally, it's like, okay, now I can focus on, where am I going to get my food? Where am I going to sleep?
Yeah.
How am I going to live my life to get better? And as you said, you were uncertain about what your job prospects were looking like, and then that was the time that it was like, okay, I can finally not care that all these people would walk away from me, or that this was something uncomfortable. Like, because I am just hungry for something that will provide for me, my family, and so that takes precedent. And it makes me think about how we are encouraged, especially in like the latter half of the Bible, the New Testimony, for those that don't read the Bible, how we are encouraged to fast. And the idea behind it being, from a spiritual stance, you fast to get closer so that you depend on God. But from a psychological stance, as you go through your life and you're consuming, hyper consuming on so much, whether it's media, social media, food, constant buzz and gossip, those things distract you. And you can never sit and really just get comfortable in understanding what you actually need rather than what you're just constantly around. Versus when you're fasting and maybe you're going for a couple of days, you're like, I don't care about what song that just came out that was so demonic. I don't care about doggone somebody just kind of did this like side swipe of my car, where's my food? Oh, I just need my food. And just that, the shift of perspective when you can just flush out everything. It amazes me always to see how, like, as much as we would love to believe that anybody can come to Christ in any situation, and when people say, like, why do bad things happen to good people? It really is because it seems like people just can't find God in the goodness of the world.
And that's when they need it the most. Like when I was telling you before, I was at the height of how I was in my business and money and all of this. And I needed God in my life more than ever at that point. And that's what I wasn't searching for. And it's so funny you were talking even too, like we get so obsessed with the things of the world, and Jesus says, don't worry about any of those. Don't worry about the clothes on your back. Don't worry about the food. All you need is me. It's a huge shift when you start to grasp that.
Absolutely. So when we look at your interest in rock here.
Yes.
All right. So for those of you that don't know, JD actually has a YouTube channel, and he's got some covers. He's got some video gameplay.
Yep.
And like, so what lines up your interest, JD?
Oh man.
We know that you're a metalhead.
Yep.
So that's confirmed. We've
Yep.
spoken a little bit about anime.
Yep.
You guys, some of the first things that JD and I interacted with involved, like, I think I was wearing some type of Dragon Ball Z shirt.
You were wearing a Dragon Ball Z shirt. We didn't even know each other at all. And I think I made a beeline all the way across the atrium to shake your hand.
And he referenced this, and I'm like, yeah, somebody knows the culture.
Yeah.
So anime aware, culture filled
Yep.
person,
Yep.
A metalhead.
Yep.
And I'm assuming music lover all around.
For the most part, yeah. The thing that's funny is, so growing up, it was primarily my mom's influences were mainly the Beatles and more of that kind of rock. And my dad was the heavier stuff like Led Zeppelin, Black Sabbath, stuff like that. So, but then I also grew up in that mid 80s, early 90s pop scene and the grunge scene. So it's so funny. So here I am in high school. I'm recalling all this now. I'm a metalhead in high school, and my wife, this tiny petite little white girl, loves gangster rap. So we couldn't be farther apart. So really our musical interests kind of go the whole breadth. Even I like classical music, some electronic music and stuff like that too. So
it's like one end of heavy metal to the other end of classical music.
Yeah.
One music is like the hardcore, like rebel music, and the other is like,
It's so funny. I remember I always prefer my music harder and faster, but I remember one time I had started listening to this band years ago, a band called Pantera, and I hadn't listened to them in a while, and then I put them back on after maybe a 10-year hiatus. I'm like, man, why is he so angry? What is he screaming about even? Like, I kind of shifted in my life a little bit. I'm like, man, this guy's, he's yelling at me. Why is he so angry? I'm like, oh, am I old now?
You know, it's funny. I used to rap, like, listen to it, follow the culture, do it, make beats, had a whole community. And I got to a point where I kind of was away from music for a while.
Yep.
And then one day I got into country music.
Oh, yeah.
And then same thing, I went back to like some of the music that I did like and some of the music that is now. And to be fair, like the music now does not represent like good rap. So I'll say that.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But even the music that was good back when I liked it, I'm just like, man, I just don't have the ear for this anymore.
Yeah.
Like I would listen to a country song or like some solid, like there's going to be a controversial one in the Christian space, but like Elevation Worship.
Oh, yeah.
Over like putting on like some T.I. that I used to listen to, Lil Wayne, Drake, Jay-Z, Kanye, just all these different people. And it's like, wow, same thought, like, I'm getting older.
Yeah. Part of that for me too, I've had a hard time kind of parting ways with some of that music.